You don't want to get
I literally was going multiple times a week for a year. And I mean, it was like they would post the Monday trivia question, and they could all wait until I got there. So I could do the Monday trivia with them. I mean, I knew everybody in there, all by name, and they all knew me by name. It was scary.
I have a little trouble with my back.
No, where are you going? He's over there. Oh, okay. Oh, you see, my doctor was at Houston, but I had him write me the script so I could go to my physical therapist over at St. Francis, because I love the rehab facility at St. Francis. And my physical therapist is so that's where I would go. Because he did my shoulder. Because he did my shoulder. He did St. Francis. That's when I started going to PT over there. So then when I had my knee, even though the doctor was so confused, sometimes
What are we talking about?
my knee doctor,
What about it?
one who lived just tomorrow, Charleston, was over.
Oh,
I know, I just.
Ponce.
Yeah, Dr. Ponce, Brett Ponce.
I see Dr. Rulock.
Oh, yeah, no, he did my elbow and wrist when I was got hit by a car, and when I was riding my bike and I had to lay the bike over to avoid the car that ran the red light. I was in the crosswalk on my bicycle.
Where was that?
Oh, no, that was a while back. And I was clipped in, I couldn't get my feet down in time, and I had to turn back sideways to avoid, because the car literally ran the red light. And just kept on going.
I was almost the literal, so,
And the thing is, I mean, this is one of the crosswalks on the Dragonfly. So, I mean, they're well marked, and I mean, this is one tough fight. And it's just hands up and ran along. And it wasn't one of them that's like flashing. It's one that's at an actual red stoplight for traffic. With cross streets. Oh my.
I came early, so calmly and
Right,
died.
so do it, Janet, there you go.
Wait,
You gotta turn.
Go that way.
All right, so
After the dictation, usually, I'm
supported.
done with classes,
All right.
basically.
Sometimes if you go in the middle.
It's also,
Good gravy, your phone is heavy.
I don't know, I just.
There we go. Cheers.
But I think it's pretty good on.
All right, take another one. I'm going to. Why am I on video? It's on video. Okay, you have to delete that video and take it off a video.
I mean, I heard the first one.
No video on that.
Let's go back to
But it's out of the scope, so it was video.
Just the, there.
Gotta get the combo picture.
How's there a white dot in there?
Where is that? There we go. I did a whole bunch. You can have it.
Rosie, how are you? Good to see you.
Good answer.
You guys were so wonderful. You guys were
Very good. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, she was on the alto flute. I was
for coming up for this lecture recital is Pascalianas by Francisco Sumaque, Latin American Dance and Ancestral Voices in Modern Sound. I'm truly honored to have all you in this nice audience, friends, and my flute friends as well, of course. And I hope you find this presentation both meaningful and enjoyable as well. I would like to extend special thanks to our panel members, Dr. Lisa Oberlander, Dr. James Sopor, and of course, my teacher, Dr. Andre Martin, for their support, mentorship, and guidance in this process. So we are going to talk in two big chapters. The first one is a conceptual framework that is a review of the solo flute, the flute in Latin America, the music in the Colombian Caribbean. When I come from is the Caribbean of Colombia, and Francisco Sumaque, the composer. And the second chapter will be focusing the Pascalianas is a brief analysis of the piece, the design and thematic structure as well, and the stylistic context of the process. And then, of course, the performing of the piece. So Pascalianas is a piece composed in 1988, and it's an outstanding contribution to the Latin American solo flute repertoire. The work fuses an pedagogical intent with some sophisticated contemporary idioms. Written for his young son, Pascal, this piece transformed the world of prehistoric birds into sound, bridging childhood imagination with modern compositional exploration. The trilogy demonstrates Sumaque's dual artistic identity, deeply rooted in Colombian rhythmic vitality and timbral color, yet fluent in European avant-garde language. It designs a pen of motivic transformation, register contrast, and timbral innovation, rather than tonal or harmonic progression. Let's talk a little bit about the solo flute role. That is very important because this is a solo piece for an accompaniment flute. So it's important to understand how is the solo flute role in the history. And the phrase, the flute stands out as one of the most remarkable musical instruments. Its rich history, adaptability to various genres and styles, and versatility in classical and popular music contribute to its popularity. The flute's agility and skill make it a symbol of virtuosity, captivating composers from the Renaissance to the present day, boasting one of the most varied and prolific repertoires in the realm of music. The accompaniment flute repertoire demonstrates the instrument's ability to transcend its traditional role as a melodic voice. It demands innovative compositional techniques and interpretative strategies, highlighting its technical versatility, harmonic potential, and capacity to offer a rich and immersive musical experience. It's necessary to analyze the perspective of and responsibility from the composer side and the performer side as well. The composer must develop his creative process, taking into account the acoustic and timbral characteristics of the instrument, as well its technical capabilities and limitations, to construct an idiomatic discourse that makes the most of its technical and expressive resources. On the other hand, the performer must take interpretative decisions influenced by the factors as style, the story they intend to convey, and the clarity which this narrative should communicate to the audience. How is the evolution and how is the impact of this evolution on the flute repertoire? According to Nancy Toff, an eminent American writer, flutist, and one of the most renowned authorities in the history of the flute, the evolution of the instrument marked by mechanical and acoustical advancements around the 17th century significantly influenced the compositional language of the time. A pivotal moment occurred when the German flute transitioned to the bone flute, a gradual transformation that encountered significant resistance. It spanned several decades before the modern system gained widespread acceptance among flutists. In the Baroque era, the instruments evolved to enhance melodic flexibility and range. These modifications made it more versatile and efficient for the evolving musical language, We've moved away from the monody and incorporated the polyphony. This transformation paved the way for the modern flute, adapting it to the intricate demands of the Baroque compositions. Despite improvement, composer and performers expressed concern about the flute's tone quality and intonation. Nancy Toff noted that Alessandro Scarlatti disliked flute players, and Luigi Cherubini said, "The only thing worse than one flute is two." The flute's reputation was saved by its attractive tone and in the 18th century. It wasn't till the 1840s that the big changes were introduced, leading to the definite evolution of the modern flute. Theobald Boehn, a flutist, composer, and goldsmith, potentially made the most significant contribution not only to the flute but the most of woodwind's instrument, and efficient mechanisms that improve the instrument's acoustic performance while providing the performer with enhanced ergonomics and control. It's important to note that Bohm did not invent the whole mechanism himself. Rather, these adaptations, grounded in acoustic theories, laid the foundation for the many other makers to contribute to the version of the instruments we know today. The flute's definite evolution took place in late 19th and early 20th centuries, consolidating its position as a modern instrument. While it's true that this model met with considerable resistance to expansion and acceptance, its relative rapid reception in England and France means that the old model became increasingly obsolete. The flute became thoroughly a modern instrument, metallic, uniform, well-tuned, and technically agile. At the same time, its artistic role was redefined from an accompaniment or pastoral instrument to an expressive and symbolic voice of modern sound, driven by impressionism and new schools of interpretation. So, how can we analyze the definite evolution of the instrument? In the technical aspects, the Bohm system was extended in Europe in the 18th century, and Germany and Austria still prefer the old system. So it was a kind of resistance there for the new instrument. It has a greater sound projection and improved the sonority, and a wider dynamic range. The change from wood to metal transforms the timbre, brighter, more penetrating, and flexible, in tune with the post-romantic modern orchestra. In the aesthetic and musical context, composers from the second half of the 19th century used it with greater prominence of timbre: Debussy, Ravel, Fauré, Franck, Reinecke, Sanson, Tchaikovsky, among others. At the turn of the century, French Impressionism marked a turning point. The flute became a symbol of color, sensuality, and atmosphere, especially after the Claude Debussy Prélude à l'après-midi du Fond in 1894. Interpreters are schools. National schools of interpretation emerged, each with its own aesthetics. I think that the most important or the most remarkable is the French school, because flutists as Paul Tafanel, Philippe Gaubert, and later Marcel Moyse laid the foundation for the modern sound: purity, flexibility, and homogeneity. The German school were more focused on warm sound and clear articulation. The American and British school, they adapted their French heritage to brass instruments, consolidating the bright and resonant style of the 20th century. And the most remarkable exposures are William Kincaid and Georges Barrère as well. International expansion of the flute. Through the flutist training in Paris, French influence spread to the United States, Latin America, and Asia as well. In America, the modern flute was quickly adopted thanks to imports from European makers and founding of symphony bands and conservatories in the late 19th century. The flute's evolution, both mechanical and acoustical, significantly impacts its role as a solo instrument. The modern flute inspired a renaissance of accompaniment solo repertoire. These works introduced performers to unique interpretative and this stylistic challenge, pushing the boundaries of the standardized modern flute. These changes enhance the instrument's technical and acoustic potential, sparking renewed interest in composing for it. Composers explore the expanding possibilities of the flute, building on avant-garde techniques while embracing the modern era. Lyle C. Mary Manning, American flutist, educator, and composer, explained in the essay, and accompanying woodwind solos, the reverb not only occurred in the flute, but also permeated other members of the woodwind family. So what are the challenges for playing solo pieces for the flute? In an interview with Dr. Andre Martin, our flute teacher at the Chopin School of Music, it's fair enough to say that each piece has its unique challenges, but some are universal. Regardless the style or the period, the rhythm, meter, and intonation are likely the primary challenge in performing an accompaniment flute works. Without the support of an accompaniment instrument or ensemble, maintaining a clear sense of metrical structure becomes significantly more arduous. To address this, the flutist must emphasize the necessity of a disciplined and methodical approach to the learning the piece, allowing expressive freedom to manifest only after achieving complete mastery. Another significant challenge lies in the difficulty of attaining precise pitch without a vertical harmonic framework that provides context for the intervallic and harmonic relationships. Managing timing for solo compositions, for example, like Bach, C.P.E. Bach or Johann Sebastian Bach, differ from that required for Debussy in Syrinx or the Sonata Appassionata by Kargeler. Each piece demands its unique balance and structure and expresses freedom. Let's talk about what's going on with the flute in Latin America. The flute in Latin America carries a musical heritage rooted in the Central European tradition. As a result of the colonial and post-colonial periods, this historical process fostered an acculturation through the interaction of the diverse cultures and convergence in the region. This hybridization process varies from country to country, even region to region. Common elements like language, food, dance, among others, to mention a few cultural components, exhibit subtle variation that are sometimes perceptible only to individuals with a deep cultural familiarity with the territory. Music, like communities, seek a path that preserves its Eurocentric roots while revalidating local knowledge and tradition to build more intercultural societies that distance themselves from the enculturation of the conquest era. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Europhones held a prominent position in several indigenous musical traditions. Instruments like the quena and antara in the Andean region and the tupi and ocarina in the Mesoamerica serve ceremonial, agricultural, and communicative purposes. These aerophones were often crafted from bone, clay, or cane, tuned to non-Western scales and performed collectively rather than individually. The concept of soloists, as prevalent in Europe, music was absent in Latin America. Yet these practices foster a profound symbolic connection between breath, nature, and spirituality that echoes in later works for solo flute. The majority of indigenous people found in the aerophones sonority as a form to communication with the nature and their own beliefs. Drums were a later element, a result for the hybridization resulting from the arrival of enslaved people from Africa. The European flute, traverso, and recorder was introduced by missionaries during the evangelization around the 16th and 17th centuries, and was mainly used in cathedral chapels and monasteries. The flute gained prominence in the 19th century in Latin America, influenced by the European Romantic music. Local composers started blending European lyricisms with regional dances, creating new aesthetic expressions. At present, the study of the flute and music in general is based on European and American methodologies and methods as well. However, the presence of instruments in traditional popular music varies depending on the country and the type of ensemble. In Colombia, we have rhythms like the bambuco, cumbia, pasillo, joropo, and danza. In Venezuela, the gaita, danza zuliana, and the merengue. In Brazil, the samba, the choro, the choriño. In Argentina, the chacarera, classical and new tango. Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic, even if they are not part of Latin America, they have a great musical influence due to the relationship between the Caribbean, where genres such as the danzón, son, and bolero stand out, and the flute gain really importance in this popular music there. These are some examples of Latin American flute pieces that embed within the popular tradition. They exhibit the characteristics of the European lyricisms intertwined with the dance and rhythms of the local culture. Now, let's listen to Venezuela and Colombia in the plains. We share a very extensive region. There is the plains there. It's come from the joropo, which is a dance. It's a variation that we're going to listen is the pajarillo. Let's listen to that. So how composers incorporate this dance, that is really powerful and kind of virtuosistic in solo flute pieces. So let's listen a little bit of this excerpt of the Solo de Pajarillo by the Venezuelan composer Omar Acosta. So now let's now close in the scope to our region. This is Colombia, the Colombian Caribbean music. This is the coast of the Caribbean, the North Country, and stands one of the Latin American most dynamic musical regions. Here, the convergence of indigenous, African, and European tradition have yielded a distinctive sonic tapestry, manifesting in genres such as the cumbia, porro, vallenato, mapalé, and fandango. Most of these rhythms are passed down from generation to generation through an oral tradition, perhaps constituting a hybrid manifestation that integrates music, the literary, and dance. It's not easy to conceive one of these genres without any of these elements. In conclusion, the musical heritage of Colombia's Caribbean coast originates from a rural tradition where music fulfilled a social purpose by accompanying livestock, herding, crop cultivation, fishing, and naturally, festivals and religious ceremonies. Okay, cowboy songs, cantos de vaquería, represent one of the most profound and deeply rooted expression of the connection between human beings, nature, agricultural and rural work. They come from the Spanish decimero, a 10-line stanza that constitute the peasant adaptation of the song that accompanies the work of herding and herding cattle. These chants become a ritual intended to pacify the cattle, facilitating milking and transport. It possesses a distinct aesthetic logic. The melodies do not correspond to the same elements of the common practice, and they are imbued in a permanent improvisational elements. The cowboy sings to a cow or the entire herd based on his observations or what he needs to happen. Colombian researcher Rosana Alarcón states that the cowboys heard the animals talking to them. In the case of the milking cows, each cow has its own verse while each of the people milking them took the time to call its name. It was a kind of ritual surrounding the work that they did, and it is related to the idea of the voices as work, tool, and singing as a medium. Alarcón also says that this practice is not limited to the Colombian Caribbean coast, but is present in diverse cultures, both ancient and contemporary. In numerous nomadic tribes, animal singing serves as a tool of communication not only with the livestock, but also to impart instruction to those in charge of the day.
¿Quién es esa que está ahí? Que se ve tan primorosa. Pregunto cuál es la madre que parió esa linda rosa. Que bien,
Okay, let us now examine the landscape of the unaccompanied flute repertoire in Latin America. According to the always an investigator, Dr. John L. Walker, president of the Institute of Latin American Studies in Music, around the 1940s, a compositional movement emerged from the solo flute, whose unifying feature was an aesthetic confluence between European formalisms and regional artistic expression, giving rise to new sonorities. The mid of the 20th century saw the growth of a struggle throughout Latin America to reconcile local and regional influence within the framework of European formalisms, and particularly to serve the sonic possibilities of the unaccompanied solo flute. Walker presents a fascinating analysis from a musicological perspective, which examines the roots of the historical development of the flute. This analysis explores how the flute gained ground around sparked interest in both in popular and concert music. In Latin America, we call academical music or culture music. During the colonial period, European flutes, recorders, and traversos coexisted with local aerophones. Church and military bands introduced new tonalities and performance practices. Over time, this influence merged European diatonicisms with indigenous moral scales, producing the characteristic mixolydian and pentatonic inflections found in the Caribbean melodies. The traverse flute and the clarinet were well received due to the Spanish missionaries, evangelization, and cultural exchanges. This led to hybrid language for the flute, influenced by pre-Columbian aerophones, missionary influences, and the 18th and 19th century cultural exchanges. In a nutshell, Walker argues that the flute did not emerge abruptly in Latin America, but rather represents a profound cultural heritage that integrates indigenous symbolisms, colonial practices, and consequently, European influence. I got some flutes here. So this one is a tiny model of an antara or zampoña, or it's very similar to the flute pan, and it's come from the Andean region, not only in Colombia, but Bolivia, Peru as well, and Ecuador. Yes. Okay. Wait there. This other one is come from the Amazonas, and it's in a very special, the name is Pincuyo. Can you say that, Pincuyo? It's very difficult, that word to say. And it's used for the ritual of the Yajé or Ayahuasca, which is a kind of astral travel. It's a spiritual travel that should be done by a shaman, a very trained person to do that. And they play this flute that is only one hole inside, so it's combined with chants as well. It's like this. It's a beautiful quena here. And this becomes in the same Andean region that Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador. This is the gaita or kizoo. This is from the Caribbean Colombian flute. It's made of the cactus heart. Yeah, it's playing the cumbia, or this is a word for playing cumbia, or most traditional rhythm in the Caribbean music. Okay, can you see the connection between the traverse flute and the aerophones that were there before all this colonialism process there? So it's a very close sonority of the Latin American tapestry there, sonic tapestry there. Now let's talk about the Francisco Zumaque, the composer of the Pascalianas. He's a Colombian composer, arranger, conductor, and producer from a family with a long tradition of popular music. He's one of the most emblematic figures on the new aesthetics modernity, given that his work represents the convergence between classical and academic music and tradition of the Colombian Caribbean. He graduated as a composer and conductor of the National Conservatory in 1970, and after that he won a scholarship to continue his studies in Paris with Nadia Boulanger, Oliver Messiaen, and Igor Markevich. He also studied electronic music at the group of researchers in Paris with Pierre Schiffer and Pierre Henry. When he arrived in France, he went to his future teacher's Nadia Boulanger house with a trunk of recording, mostly previous compositions, accompanied by Rafael Puyana, who had also been her student, a Colombian harpsichordist, composer widely recognized in Europe. Boulanger listened these tapes one after one without showing any enthusiasm. A little worried, Zumaque came up with the idea of using the piano to improvise on Colombian rhythms, to which the teacher finally declared, "That is the way it is." She wanted her students to express themselves from their cultural and their inner selves. Zumaque would point out years later, "She taught me to respect the living and strong musical tradition of my land." Zumaque is a really international award composer. He won the Prince Rainier of Monaco Composition Grand Prix, the Latin American Composition Competition in Rio de Janeiro, the Goethe Prize of the Compositional in Munich, and was 3 times winner of the Lili Boulanger Grand Prize for Composition. Let's watch a video about Zumaque in a masterclass with Nadia Boulanger.
Font que Nadia Boulanger a exercé une influence majeure sur une partie de la musique de ce siècle.
Qu'est-ce qui aide à comprendre une phrase musicale? Qu'est-ce qui aide en musique à comprendre la forme de ce qu'on dit? Et attention entre vous qui vont trouver le moyen de vous faire comprendre aussi. Et nous savons déjà qu'il y a quelques-uns qui se font comprendre et d'autres qui cherchent à se faire comprendre. Ou d'autres qui n'ont pas grand-chose à dire. Mais quand vous chantez en temps pour faire la cadence, Voulez-vous jouer la première phrase?
Okay, let's talk about the Pascalianas. This is the second chapter. Pascaliana was composed during the time Schumacher lived in Germany between the 1988 and 1990. And it was composed for the young performance competition in German, of course, which required competitors to present a contemporary work. The work was later revised and produced in 2010 in collaboration between the composer and the renowned Colombian flutist Rafael Rodriguez, a flute professor at the Javeriana University in Bogotá. Rafael is one of the most influential flutists in Colombia, both as a performer and a professor. His students are frequently winners in flute national and international competition. His professional activities have taken him to perform in venues across Colombia, Panama, Venezuela, Spain, Japan, and the United States as well. This analysis will use that revised edition, which redefined the instrumentation as alto flute, bass flute, and C flute. As can you see there, I have a bunch of flute there because that new edition was originally composed for the small flute, the regular flute. But now, with this edition, they decide to spread the different movement in this instrument. The work was conceived as a narrative from father to son, serving as encouragement for the child to embrace the contemporary music. Pascal, a 9-year-old flute apprentice, was a dinosaur enthusiast whose favorite toy was dinosaurs. The composer began creating stories based on his son's games and subsequently set about setting them off to music, resulting of the trilogy. Each movement personifies a different archetype: the playful and energetic pterodactylus, the monumental and robust dromornis, and the lyrical and agile Archaeopteryx. The pterodactylus is a small pterosaur belonging to the late Jurassic period and was predominantly discovered in the region of Germany, the present day. The dromornis was a large flightless bird that habited Australia during the late Miocene. It was a really big bird. It came to be like 3 meters and weighed around 1,000 pounds as well. And their Archaeopteryx is the primitive bird. It's a small bird-like dinosaur, lived around the late Jurassic period in the present Germany as well. And it could be the evolution of the old birds to the modern birds as well. They share the feathers, wings, and wishbone as well. In an interview with Rodriguez, the flutist, for this lecture recital reference, I was so curious to learn more about the birds and each movement of the trilogy represents. And it struck me that the new instrumentation they proposed to use, alto, bass, and C flute, really captured the physical and flight traits of each bird. Kind of a lucky break there. So, how's the structural design of Pascalianas? The work could be classified within the scope of the programmatic language, given its clear intention to evoke sense, images, and soundscapes. Its descriptive nature is notable and closely relates to each of the prehistoric birds depicted in it. Throughout the 3 movements, Schumacher employs extended techniques such as overblowing, slap tonguing, which could be better understood as a tongue ram, and overtones, among others. Furthermore, he used unconventional terms to describe emotional and interpretative cues. He used things like sabroso, that it means savory, or sollozando, that it means sobbing, or juguetón, that playful, among others, an aspect that demonstrates the composer's Caribbean influence. The structure of Pascaliana exhibits a coherent and highly descriptive discourse. Schumacher achieved a fluid narrative through the implementation of transformation of melodic and rhythmical motif, as well as changes in register that generate significant contrast. The incorporation of extended techniques is not an isolated resource. Rather, it reinforced this narrative by providing an interesting timbral variety. The first movement present a rhythmical motifs that are repeated through all the episodes, alternate with a dance-like and enigmatic elements. The formal scheme could be understood like A, B, C, D, A, in which the main motif undergoes rhythmic and melodic variation. This structure resembles the traditional rondo. However, it could also be taken as an episodic form due to the contrast in between the different sections. The most significant motif imitates the lament-based improvisational chant characteristics of the cowboy tradition. And the inclusion of different elements of the cumbia, Afro-Latin dance, like sabroso, juguetón, are perceived. And in some other moments, they evoke the loneliness of the work of the cowboys in the field. So we can see in this opening, let's expose this. Okay. Do you remember the video? Do you remember the video where the cowboys chants? It's very similar to this. And you can add some lyrics. Could be something. Vaquita mía, vení pa' acá, vení pa' acá, vení pa' acá, vaquita mía. So really the composer catch this sense of the field and bringing it into this music. In other episodes, this stabilizes the contrast to the stepwise, chromatic motion and legato articulation, and add really very dancistic surface in that process there. I'm sorry about that. That motif is really characteristic of the Colombian cumbia. Okay, there is another interesting thing that the composer include in this movement is how two different cultural things converge in the same episode. And one is coming from the chicote, which is a dance that is an indigenous dance in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada of Colombia, and the other comes from the montuno, which is the way that play the piano for accompanying the salsa music. And they put that together side by side, and it's really kind of a contrasting cultural convergence there. This is the montuno, and then the chicote. The second movement, the dromornis, is resonant and heaviness there. The pterodactylus symbolize the flight, dromornis embodies the grounded mass. The movement is quite descriptive, wide, and dynamic, through the introspect with a different sequence of patterns. The use of a slap tone, that extended technique, really apport, and the use of a slower tempo, trill the interjections and open a pedal motif function as a gravitational center. And these kind of interruptions and accelerated trills are really combining different extended techniques in a very descriptive movement there. Okay, the trilogy culminates with the Archaeopteryx, the most lyrical and overtly melodic of the three. Its formal trajectory could be ABCA structure, and it presents an evolution from simplicity to expressive fullness. The primary theme is a cantabile stepwise that stabilizes a quasi-modal center through a recurring and scalar fragment. The third movement of Sumake is characterized by an stringendo, crescendo, and ornamentation transform the primordial song into a complex flight. It emphasizes timbral and experimentation, encouraging the performer to explore the instrument full range and creating a soundscape characterized by contrast, color, and textural diversity. Archaeopteryx stand out of the piece with the most contemporary music language of the trilogy, and at the same time, the most distant for the Latin American sound tradition. So what is the stylistic content of the piece? Sumake employs fertile motive vocabulary, repetition, intervallic economy, and timbral variation. This accelerating trills function as a global unifier, signaling transformation in each movement climax. Pascalianas by Sumake uses a timbral spectral approach, redefining harmonica sound and chord. The piece blends European modernism with Colombian expressivity, incorporating a rhythmical impulse and improvisatory phrasing reminiscent of the tropical dances. Pascaliana is a distinctive Latin American modernism piece that compensates for harmonic hierarchy and timbre, rhythm, and gesture. The three movements delineate an archetypal metamorphosis for percussive plays to resonant gravity to lyrical transcends. Stylistically, he integrates local expressive codes with a contemporary technique. Pascaliana transcends its pedagogical origin and stands as both a paternal gift and exploration of sound of narrative. The flute, through the breath, color, and repetition, can evoke the evolutionary memory of the flight. Okay, this is the reference I use for support this academic work. If you want to consult things, I can send this for you. And thank you. Now is the performance Pascalianas. Thank you so much. Thank you.